You have a purpose in life, purpose here on earth. God has a plan, and you have a place in that plan, whether you see it or not. And many times we don't see it, but we have to trust that God's moving in our lives, and that He has a purpose for us. Many times we go through things, preparation, training for what God has for us to do, what He has planned. Now, He doesn't tell us, okay, you're going to go through 5 years of training before your purpose is fulfilled. We look at it as part of life. We have to understand God's moving. He's always got something going on, and He's training us for a reason. And when we see that and understand He's doing it for a purpose, it's easier to get through these things. We're going to talk about somebody in the Bible and the things they went through for this purpose that God had for them in the future. They couldn't see it, but in the end, looking back, they could. They went through some hard times. Sometimes we go through hard times, tests and trials and training, but it's for what God has for us in the future, what He needs us to do. So we're going to look at that. Welcome to the channel. I'm Kerry. I enjoy doing these Bible studies, looking for truths that will encourage you as you go through this thing we call life. So today we're going to talk about your purpose in life. And I'm going to read several verses in Genesis so we can understand what's going on, and we can see how this develops through this man's life, Joseph. We're talking about Joseph. And through his life, how God put him in places he needed to be for training for the future. Now, the places he's put most people would collapse and give up on God and just fall apart. But Joseph stood with God, believed God had a purpose, had a reason for this, and just waited and did his best as he went through this. So we're starting Genesis chapter 37, verse 1. And I'm just going to hit the highlights to kind of get you a basic understanding of what's going on. You need to read the whole thing. There's several chapters in there, but it's really good reading because it gives you an understanding of how God works things out. So verse 1 says, Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report to them from his father. Now, I'll butcher these names in this, so just ignore that and go on. I can't pronounce them. But Joseph's 17 years old here. He's gone out do the work with the rest of his brothers, and evidently his brothers aren't upstanding citizens. I'll put it that way. So he comes back and tells his dad what's going on because he wants his dad to know. Now, we'll see through this that Joseph tries to do his best. He tries to be obedient to his father, which is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be obedient to your parents. And he tries to do this. And it costs him sometimes. But in the end, and that's what we have to look at, in the end, is what we're looking at, the future. You do what's right now, and it will pay off in the end. Because right's right and wrong's wrong. That's how simple it is. You can't do what the world wants you to do. You have to do what God says we're supposed to do to fulfill this purpose. So verse 3, now Israel, which is Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. Also he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. So, Dad's got a favorite kid. It happens. How you handle that is on you. You may grow up and have kids, and you may have a favorite kid. You may not. You shouldn't. You should love all of them. But, Jacob's not perfect. And Joseph listens. Sometimes the kid that listens to you and obeys you and pays attention is the one you like better than the one that is always arguing, always, causing trouble and causing you grief. Maybe that's what the deal was. I don't know. But Joseph showed that he loved Joseph more. His brothers knew it, and they hated him for it. That's a real good family there, hating your brother. But they did. It's verse 5. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field, when behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. Indeed, your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. His brothers said to him, shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for the dream and for his words. He's a younger brother, and sometimes older siblings get upset at younger siblings because, I'm the oldest. You should listen to me. I should be the one that takes control. And here Joseph's had this dream and basically telling him one of these days, I'm going to be ruler and you're going to bow down to me. And they didn't like that. That's not the way things worked, especially in this day and age in the Old Testament. The oldest son was always the one who was supposed to be the leader of the next generation. Well, Joseph's saying, well, I'm going to do that. You're going to bow down to me. They already don't like him. It says they hate him. Now they really hate him. So it goes on. Verse 9, then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, look, I have dreamed another dream. This time the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to me. So he told it to his father and his brothers. His father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come and bow down on the earth to you, before you? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now, the father's older and should be wiser, and he doesn't like the dream any better than the boys do, because it says, they interpret it that dad and mom and 11 brothers are going to bow down to Joseph. In other words, Joseph's going to rule over them. He's going to have power over them. And they don't like that because they're, again, in that the customs were back then, the father never bowed down to his child. The father was the ruler. Until he died, he was the top person. And Joseph's saying, well, one of these days, you're going to come to me. You're going to need something. You're going to come to me and you're going to bow down before me and give me honor. They didn't like that. But Jacob was smart enough to know that dreams back in these days, especially back in these days, were really a big thing. They were thought to have come from God, and that if you had a dream, it was something significant. So people paid attention to that, and Jacob understands that. So Jacob puts that in the back of his mind, thinking, okay, maybe there might be something to this somewhere. I don't know. So then verse 12 says, then his brothers went to feed their father's flock at Shechem. And Israel, which is Jacob, told Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. And he said to him, here am I. Then he said, please go, and if it is well, see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flock, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron and sent him to Shechem. Now, a certain man found him, and there he was wandering in the field. And the man asked, saying, what are you seeking? So he said, I am seeking my brothers. Tell me where they are feeding the flocks. And the man said, they have departed from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Now, the brothers ain't where they're supposed to be. Now, again, we don't know why, but from their past, it sounds like maybe they're off doing something they ain't supposed to be doing, and they're not where their father told them to go. So they're not honoring their father for whatever reason. He told them to go to Shechem, and they wound up going somewhere else for whatever reason. Joseph finds them, though. Verse 18 says, now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, They conspired against him to kill him. Now, this is a loving family. Joseph's 17 years old here and doing what his dad asked him to do, trying to honor his parents. And his brothers now are plotting to kill him because, number one, he told on them before they got in trouble because they wasn't doing what they're supposed to do. Now they're off somewhere they're not supposed to be, and they've got a pretty good idea if he goes back and tells dad, they're going to get in trouble again. So they don't like that. And they don't like him because he's their dad's favorite, and he's honest and upright, and they don't like that. So verse 19 says, Then they said to one another, Look, this dreamer is coming. Come, therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. We will say some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. So, good old brothers here are plotting to kill him because they don't like him, because he's not one of them. He stands apart. As Christians, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to stand apart from the world. We should be different. And that's part of our purpose, is to be different. So when people look at us and they see we're different, they'll wonder why. And that could open the door up to talk to them about Christ, about Jesus, to help others come to Christ. So now Joseph is 17 years old, hated by his brothers, treated like someone who's hated. Like I said, he appears to be more obedient, more godly than his brothers. He's always trying to do what's right, and he tries to do what his father is asking, his earthly father and his heavenly father, because he knows the word. And back in these days, they all were taught about God. They knew about God. They knew right and wrong according to what God said. They had a choice then, just like we do today. Now, they're not where they're supposed to be. They plot to kill Joseph. So at 17 years old, he's already having issues, having problems in his life. Where are you at? Are you having problems in your life? Are you going through trials and troubles? How you look at it will make a difference on how you go through it. You have to understand God is training you for something in the future, or he has put you in a place, or he's going to put you in a place where you can serve him to reach people, to reach 1,000. He's going to put you where you need to be. It's not always going to be pleasant, but if you understand and you trust God, you'll know that it's for the best. And that's where we have to get to. In order to understand your purpose and to fulfill your purpose, God may have to move you places that you don't want to be so that you can fulfill it. So verse 23, so it came to pass when Joseph had come to his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. They took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. So now Joseph gets attacked by his brothers, throw him into a pit with no water in it. They didn't lower him in this pit. They didn't give him a rope and let him crawl down. They threw him into this pit with no water. So that means there's no water to drink, no water to break his fall. He just hits the hard ground. So things are looking really good right now for Joseph, aren't they? Then they take his prized possession, which is his coat that his dad gave him, take it away from him. So life's not looking real good right now for Joseph. Life may not be looking real good for you right now. Maybe you're not at the job you want. Maybe you've been demoted. Maybe you've been fired. Maybe your coworkers don't like you. Maybe your boss doesn't like you. I don't know. But the thing to look at is, why am I here? What is God trying to do? Why am I here? What does he need me to do while I'm here? Is this training? Am I learning how to deal with people that don't like me? It's easy to get along with people that like you. It's people that don't like you. It's those coworkers that don't do their job. that are lazy, that you have to pick up the slack for, they're the ones hard to deal with. But when you learn to do that and you learn the importance of work ethic, honesty, and doing what's right, you will see you're training for something in the future. You can't trust somebody who won't work, who's got a poor work ethic. You can't trust somebody who lies all the time. You can trust somebody who tells the truth and will work, and that in the future can make a difference. We don't know what God's master plan is. That's the only thing that sometimes we get aggravated at God. He doesn't sit us down at 17 and say, okay, this is what's going to happen in the next 10 years. This is where I'm taking you. Here's the path. He doesn't tell us that. He just says, every day you get up and trust me and do what I tell you to do what's right, and you'll get there. And it's going to be good. It's for a reason. Now, between here and there may not be good, but you got to trust me on this. I've been out in the mountains, and to get to the top of a mountain is a struggle. It's hard climbing. Mountains are steep. But once you get there, the view is magnificent. It's just unbelievable how beautiful the world is from the top of a mountain. But to get from the valley to the top of the mountain to see that view is rough. And that's the way life can be sometimes. To get to where the purpose is God has for you, sometimes is a struggle. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's a difficult climb to get there. And when you're going up that mountain and all you're seeing is trees and rocks and it's straight up and down, you're not thinking about that view. Or maybe you are. Maybe you're thinking, once I get there, it'll be great. That's what you should be thinking, that the end result is what I'm trying to get to. I want to get to where I can see the view. So the struggle getting there is something I have to go through. If I want to see the view, I have to struggle from the valley to the top to get there. That's the way life is. Sometimes you're going to struggle between now and your purpose that God brings you to. But understand, it's going to be worth it when you get there. That view is amazing. It's not everybody gets to see that, and you may not get to see it again. So when you get there, you take it all in because it's phenomenal. That's what your purpose is. Understand that to get there, I may have to go to some difficult places, but I'm going to get there, and God's going to get me there. So verse 25 says, they sat down to eat a meal. So now Joseph's in this pit. They've thrown him down in this pit. They're fixing to kill him. They're sitting down to eat. Now, these are some fine, upstanding citizens we've got here. Then they lift up their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balms, myrrh, on their way to carry them to Egypt. Now, this is a bunch of traders in a caravan traveling along. They spot him. So Judah, one of Joseph's brothers, who threw him in a pit, says to his brothers, what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to these Ishmaelites, and let us not lay a hand on him, for he is our brother and our flesh. So he's got a little bit of conscience, but not much. And his brothers listened. Money talks. Greed and those things take priority many times. Then the Midianite traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. The Midianites did. So his brothers thought about how much money they could make versus killing Joseph, which, made sense. Why kill him and get nothing when they could sell him and make some money? And he's going to go off to Egypt, which is a long ways off, so he's not going to come back. He's going to be gone. He's sold into a slave. We don't have to deal with him anymore. He's out of here. But to show how heartless they are, we'll go on to verse 37. or 31. So they took Joseph's tunic, his colored coat of many colors that his dad had made for him. They killed a kid of the goats and dipped the tunic in blood. They sent the tunic of many colors and brought it to their fathers and said, "We have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not?" So now they're not only thought about killing Joseph, now they're bold-faced liars and lying to their father. So you wonder why Joseph told on them before and why their dad liked Joseph better, because he was honest with them. But all this has to be done, and Jacob's going to go through suffering, because if they don't lie to him and tell him that his son's dead, Jacob will go looking for him. If they said, we sold him to Ishmaelites and he's going to Egypt, Jacob would have went after him. But that can't happen because it's not in God's purpose. So verse 33, he recognized it and said, "This is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces." So their little ploy, their little lie worked. Jacob bought it. He thinks Joseph's dead. So Jacob tore his clothes and put on sackcloth on his waist and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and his daughters rose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "For I shall go down to the grave to my son in mourning." Thus the father wept for him. Now the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar. Now this is an important person. Potiphar was an officer and a captain of the guard. So now, at 17 years old, Joseph's hated by his brothers, treated terrible, thrown in the pit, sold as a slave, has traveled many, many miles from Hebron to Egypt, and now he's been sold as a slave to an Egyptian. But now this Egyptian, Potiphar, is like second in command, or he's a very, very high official in Pharaoh's court. Pharaoh rules the nation of Egypt. So Potiphar knows a lot about what goes on in Pharaoh's court. And over the years, Joseph will learn some of this stuff. So God has put him, he's not just a slave in Egypt, he's a slave in Potiphar's house, which is very important in this story. So God has put him there for a reason. Now, for Joseph, doesn't know none of this. We've got the story. We can read ahead. We know what's going on. Joseph doesn't. Joseph doesn't have any idea. All he knows is, here I'm a kid. I've been sold as a slave, and now I'm in a foreign country, and I've got to be a slave here. He can't just pack up and run back to dad. It don't work that way. As a slave, he can't get out of Egypt. He has no resources. He has nothing. So he's now a slave. So chapter 39, verse 1 says, "Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there." Now verse 2 says, "The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a very successful man, and was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of the house, and all that he had he put under his authority. So it was from the time that he had made him overseer of the house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessings of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate." So Joseph is sold as a slave. He comes in, he's 17-year-old. Excuse me. He's at the bottom rung, bottom slave. But Joseph does his best where he's at. As bottom slave just coming in, he does what's right. He does his best at his job, whatever his job is. And because of this, God allowed him favor in Potiphar's eyes. Potiphar paid attention. Every time Potiphar saw him, he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. He wasn't slacking off. He wasn't doing half the job. He was doing it right, doing his best. And Potiphar saw that. And he saw that anything Joseph was doing worked out well for Potiphar. So Potiphar, over time, and this didn't happen overnight. This took maybe several years for Joseph to be promoted from bottom slave to the top slave in this house. And it says here, Potiphar turned everything over to him, everything in the house, in the field, everything Potiphar had, he let Joseph deal with. All Potiphar knew is what he had for supper. Basically, what it's saying. He let Joseph take care of everything because everything Joseph did prospered. So he's making Potiphar money. He's making Potiphar look good in the neighborhood. So Potiphar's turned him loose. Okay, take care of this stuff. I'm not going to worry about it. So he had trust in him. But it's because of Joseph's attitude. Because Joseph, no matter where he's at, he did the best he could. So if he's bottom slave or he's been promoted to middle slave or he's top slave, he's doing his very best. He's not looking at his circumstances. He's not whining and complaining and my boss isn't doing what he should be doing, or my coworkers aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. He's doing what's right. And it's standing out to those around him, to his boss, to his master. His master sees this guy is different, and anything he touches helps me out. He makes my life easier. He prospers me. So I'm going to trust him. I'm going to deal with him here. So Joseph's attitude made all the difference. Your attitude will make a difference. Now, Joseph doesn't know his purpose. Joseph doesn't know that God has something else for him. All he knows is right here, right now, to be a godly person, I need to do the very best I can for my master. Even though I'm a slave, don't like being a slave, but I'm going to be the best slave I can be. And as the top slave in the house, he had it pretty good. He had access to everything. He ate well. He dressed well. He didn't have to go out in the field and plow the garden. He had other people do that because he was the top slave. So he told other people what to do. So he's doing well where he's at. He's not complaining. He's not whining. He's doing his best where he's at, knowing that if this is where God wants me to be, then that's what I'm going to do. Maybe you're where you're at because you're good at this. You're good at taking care of things. So the person you're working for, your boss, is prospering. Maybe God's blessing him because of you. You get promoted up the chain, so now you're, whatever, supervisor. Well, that's not the best job, but it's not the worst job. So if you do your best at it and your boss is prospering, maybe that's what God's doing. Maybe that's part of your purpose, is to prosper them. I don't know. You don't know. Joseph didn't know. But Joseph did the best he could where he was at, because that's the right thing to do. And God blessed him where he was because of that. He wasn't home. He wasn't taking care of his dad's flock. And now he's not bottom slave who gets all the grunt work, the dirty work. Now he's the top slave. So things have got better because of his attitude and because of his work ethic. Now it says, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. So he's a good-looking kid. Now, don't know how old he is now. This has been some time past. He may be 21. We don't know. But he's a good-looking guy. But trouble comes. And verse 7 says, "And it came to pass after these things that the master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph and said, 'Lie with me.'" Trouble in paradise. Things are going good. Woman has to get involved in it. Kind of tells what kind of woman she is. But verse 8 says, "But he refused and said to his master's wife, 'Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house. He has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do great wickedness and sin against God?'" So once again, Joseph's character, his moral values, his godliness comes in. She wants to have an affair. Potiphar's gone doing his thing. He's gone all day. Here's this good-looking kid. She wants to have an affair. He won't do it because it's not right. He says it's great wickedness, not only for my master, it'd be wrong for him, but it's wrong, it's sin in the eyes of God. So I'm not going to do this. Now, verse 10 says, "So it was as she spoke to Joseph day by day that he did not heed her to lie with her or to be with her." Now, this wasn't a one-time thing. This was a constant, everyday thing that he had to deal with. So he's facing temptations. He's facing problems in this new life, as a slave, as top slave. But he hasn't given up his standards, his moral beliefs, his character, his integrity. He's standing on doing what's right, regardless. So what could go wrong? At your job, do they ask you to do things that aren't right? Where's your integrity? Are you going to do what's right, regardless of the consequences, and trust God to take care of you? Or are you going to bow down and say, yeah, I'll do that just to keep my job? The easy thing for Joseph would have been to go in there and lie down with her, have an affair with her for now, but then it would have been worse in the end, because when Potiphar found out about it, they probably killed him because of this. Verse 11 says, "But it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside, that she caught him by his garment and said, 'Lie with me.' But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. And so it was, when she saw that he left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of the house and spoke to them, saying, 'See, he has brought in to us a Hebrew to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened, when he heard me lift up my voice and cry out, he left his garment with me and fled and went outside.'" So Baldface lied because she didn't get away. She was going to basically try to force him to have an affair with her. And he gets out of there. He leaves his coat, his robe, whatever, runs outside, gets out of there, gets out of the situation. Well, she just out and out lies that she cries out and, he attacked her and all this stuff. But Joseph stood and did what's right. Now, what Joseph doesn't know is Joseph's place in God's plan was not to be a servant at Potiphar's house the rest of his life. That was preparation. That was training for another phase. And what you have to understand is this job that you've got may not be your final destination. Maybe you're getting training where you are now for something better. They may fire you. That may be the only way that you'll get out of that job and go to another job. Joseph wasn't going to go to Egypt at 17 years old on his own. He wasn't leaving home. He was happy there. Things were great and wonderful there. But God knew the future. So in order to get Joseph from his home to Egypt, he had to make a way. And that way was for his brothers to hate him, to sell him to the Ishmaelites, to sell him to the Egyptian, to get him into Egypt. You know, you may lose your job, you may lose your home, you may lose, the things you value because you're not willing to give them up otherwise. But God, if you trust God and you're doing what's right, He's got a plan to get you to a better place. We've got to learn to trust Him. That can be hard to do, because we don't see the future. We see right now. We see, I lost my job. I lost my income. What's my family going to do? Do I trust God? Do I know that what God's word says, I will not leave you nor forsake you? That's why I'm always talking about, you've got to learn God's word. You got to learn the promises. What does God think about me? What does He say about me? What does He want from me? And if I know it's the best, then I can trust Him and know that whatever's going on is a step to the next thing. It doesn't look good. Here Joseph is doing what's right, number one slave, and now his master's wife has accused him of trying to rape her, and he knows it's not going to be good when the boss gets home, when his master gets there. But what's your attitude? How are you looking at things? Are you trusting God? Do you understand He has a purpose for you? You have a place in His master plan, and He's trying to get you to that place. And right now where you're at is training. You may not understand that. You may not see that. But if you'll think about it as it's training, what do you want me to do here, Lord? I'm going to do my best. I'm going to walk with integrity and truth. I'm not going to lie and cheat and steal like everybody else is doing. I'm going to do my job the very best I can where I'm at, because that's what's right. Not going to worry about recognition. Not going to worry about the promotions and things. I'll get to where I need to be when I need to get there. Now, I've struggled with that in my own life. There's times I thought I should have got a promotion I didn't get. And the person that got it, I didn't think was qualified. But looking back, I didn't get that promotion, so I put in for a different job. Well, that different job was where I needed to be. If I got the promotion, I'd stayed right there and never got to the other place. I made more money. I had more, I won't say influence, but I dealt with people that needed to hear about God. They needed someone to listen to them. So by not getting the promotion and changing jobs, I was fulfilling part of my purpose. I was moved. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got there. I would never thought about that other job if I had got that promotion. But since I didn't get that promotion, I looked around and wound up being where I was supposed to be. So at the time, though, I didn't see it that way. I was upset I didn't get the promotion. Pretty hacked off. But it worked out for a reason, Anyway, that's a whole different deal. But where you are, do your best and trust God. I prayed about the promotion. I didn't get it. So instead of saying, okay, thank you, Lord, that's an answer to prayer. That's not where you wanted me. I got mad because I thought I should get it. So how we look at things makes a big difference. Joseph looked at it, no matter where I'm at, I'm going to do the best I can because I'm honoring God when I do that. And then God will take care of the rest. So verse 16 says, so she kept his garment with her until the master came home. Then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to mock me. So it happened, I lifted up my voice and cried out, And he left his garment with me and fled outside. So it was when the master heard these words, which his wife spoke to him, saying, Your servant did to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master, Potiphar, took him and put him in prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined. The king's prisoners were confined, and there he was in prison. So this just didn't work out very well at all. Here Joseph is doing his best, trying to serve God, and then he gets thrown in prison after being lied about, his character attacked. Now, a lot of people would collapse right there. I thought I was doing what God wanted me to do. I thought, why did God do this to me? Why? Instead of saying, okay, God, there's a reason you didn't want me in Potiphar's house. You wanted me somewhere else. Now, prison is not my idea of your purpose, not where I want to be, but I trust you, and I don't like this at all, but I trust you, and I know that you are training me now. Again, you have me here for a reason. I'm in this prison for a reason. But now the thing to remember is this is where the king's enemies are kept, where the king's prisoners are confined. Now that's going to be important as we go through this story. Joseph doesn't know this. All he knows is I went from top slave to prison. Where's God's purpose in all this? Joseph doesn't see it. But, verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph. But is a huge word in the Bible. If is a big word in the Bible. This says, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did, it was his doing. So whatever happened in the prison, Joseph was in control. Again, this didn't happen overnight. This took time. This took several years. But Joseph did his best in prison. Whatever he was assigned to do, he did his best. And God blessed him for that, showed him favor. So the keeper of the prison figured out real quick, okay, this guy's different. He's honest. And what he does is for the best of everyone around, the best for me. As the keeper of the prison, the warden say, I don't have to worry about stuff. Joseph's taking care of it. So just like Potiphar, I don't have to worry about all this stuff in my household. Joseph's taking care of it. I can deal with my official duties. He'll take care of everything else. So Joseph found favor in the warden's eyes, and he didn't worry about stuff. Anything that Joseph needed happened because the Lord was with him. Verse 23 says, the keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made to prosper. So here he is in prison. Joseph, things still ain't looking good. It just starts to look good. I'm slave, but I'm top slave. Now all of a sudden I'm in prison, and I'm the bottom prisoner. But with his attitude and his work ethic and his honesty and his character, didn't take long until the keeper of the prison said, okay, I'm going to promote you. You're going to be top prisoner. Well, that's not the best job, but it's sure not the worst, but he's there for a reason. So all this stuff, being hated by your brothers, mocked, thrown in a pit, sold as a slave, taken to a foreign country, all these things don't look good, but they're for a reason. Now, Joseph doesn't know this yet. Where you're at, you may not understand why you're there or why these bad things are happening to me. There's a reason. It could be training, preparing you for something in the future. So in all these things, in both cases now, Joseph's been put in charge under Potiphar, who's the head of the house, the warden, who's the head of the prison. He's second under them, and he takes care of everything. He plans everything. He makes sure the supplies are there, the food's there, the prisoners have what they need, all this. He's taking care of stuff. So he's training here. He's learning how to deal with things, how to logistics, whatever it is. He's learning these things. Didn't happen overnight, but Joseph constantly is doing his best. How are you doing in your circumstances? How's your attitude? Are you learning what God is trying to teach you for the future? Are you doing your best? Are you honoring God in what you do? You have a purpose here on earth. Whether you see the plan or not, God has a plan and you're part of it. You may not see it for years, but you're training, you're preparing for this. Now, I don't know what it is. You might be the next Billy Graham, or you might just minister to one person at your job. I've seen this. God put me there for a reason, because that person needed somebody to talk to about God, to explain God, to point them to God and His Word, to see that what Jesus did for them. That was part of my purpose. That one person, and if I did it well, then I did well. If you're touching someone's life for Christ, you're doing well. Wherever you are, and that's what you need to be looking for. Why am I here right now? May not be here tomorrow. I may go to the next job. When I changed jobs, it was like a week. I went from this job to this job. So it all changed in a very short period of time. That may be what happens in your life. But am I doing the best I can where I'm at? Am I affecting those around me the best I can where I'm at? Right now. If I am, that's good. And God will use me and bless me in that. And, if I've got something better, bigger in the future, I'm being prepared for that right now. What does God need from me today? What do I need to be doing? If I'm doing my best at wherever I am, then I will be blessed in this. Jeremiah, in the Bible, Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 4, and he's talking about Jeremiah, but this applies to you too. Then the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Before I formed you in the belly, I knew you. Before thou comest out from the womb, I sanctified thee and ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Now he's talking about Jeremiah here, that he ordained from the start that Jeremiah would be a prophet. He had a purpose for Jeremiah. And through the years, he trained him up to get him to the place where he could be that prophet. Jeremiah chose to listen, and do what was right and become that prophet. At first, he didn't know it. When he's a kid, he didn't know it. But looking back, he can see where God prepared him from birth to be this prophet. Well, later on, we'll see with Joseph, looking back, 20 years maybe later, that Joseph looks back and sees, okay, this is what God had planned. I see it now. Those 20 years, I didn't. As a slave, I didn't see it. As a prisoner, I didn't see it. But now, where I'm at here now, I can see what God has done. One day you'll see that. In the meantime, how's your attitude? Are you doing what God has asked you to do where you're at? Are you doing what's right? Are you walking with integrity? Are you being honest? Are you doing your best at the job that you're doing? Are you slacking off? Are you doing, just doing enough to get by? That matters. How you're acting. Like I said, I don't know what your purpose is. Well, say, for instance, you're a Sunday school teacher, or a school teacher. Maybe you're a school teacher. You may teach hundreds of classes and not see any big results. Now I'm talking about Sunday school class. But one lesson you teach to one person who happens to be there could change everything. Everything for them. It could change everything for those around them, for their family, for the town. Who knows? You might be teaching the next Billy Graham. Maybe you're not going to be Billy Graham, but maybe you're teaching the truth of God's word to the next Billy Graham, who's going to go out and reach millions. You don't know what you're there for. But if you do the very best you can as a Sunday school teacher or as a teacher, you don't know what that next kid that comes through your class that you show love to, that you teach the truth to, that you encourage, show love to, let them know that they can do things. They're not useless, as their mom and dad's told them. They may be the next president. You don't know. So you should treat each one of them as they could be. As you teach a Sunday school lesson, teach it to the very best of your ability with the truth of God's word, not doctrine, what God says, because that person may go out and touch thousands, millions of lives. You don't know. You don't know what God's got planned. John chapter 9, verse 1. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who was blind from birth. Okay, this guy's blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or the sins of his parents? Now, back then, it was a big thing. They believed that sin brought consequences, and it does. Sin brings consequences. But this kid being born blind wasn't because of his sin. And that's what Jesus is fixing to tell him here. And Jesus answered, this happened so that the power of God could be seen in him. It wasn't his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus says. It happened so that the power of God would be seen in him. Jesus heals this man in front of the crowd. So God gets glory for it. So this kid was born blind. This man was born blind, not for any bad reasons, not because of sin, not because of whatever, because God needed him in this place at this time to be healed by Jesus, to point to Jesus as being the Messiah and to point to God. We don't know what God does. God's the creator of the universe. He created you. He can create you however you want. If you build something, you can build like you want. And what you build has no say in the matter. I do carpenter work. When I build something, I build it the way I think it needs to be built. And that building or that sign or whatever has no say in the matter. I build it the way I want it built. I am in control of that. It's what God is, and he uses it for his reason. Main thing you got to do is not underestimate your position where you are right now, and don't undervalue what you're doing. You may be the bottom slave at work. You may be the low man on the totem pole. Do what you're told the best you can do it. Don't be a slacker. Don't do it halfway. Do the best you can. Honoring God while you do that. God has you where you need to be right now. You may not stay there. He may move you up. But do the best you can where you're at. You have a gift. You have a calling. It's up to you to realize that and to use it wherever you are. You've got a purpose. It may take years to see this, but you will see it one of these days if you pay attention. Mary and Joseph, Jesus' mom and dad, they were given the task by God to raise Jesus. That was their job, and they did the very best they could to raise him right, raise him according to God's word, to teach him to have character, to have integrity. Now, Jesus already had that, but as a parent, your job is to teach your kids to do what's right, to be obedient, to honor, respect, and to learn, to walk with integrity. That's your job as a parent. And that child you raise, if you raise it the very best you can, could be the child that goes out and changes the world. They could go out and reach thousands. They could be the next Billy Graham. You don't know that. But if you don't do your best in teaching that child what's right and correcting them when they're wrong, then you are not doing what you're supposed to do. Your purpose might be just raising that kid. Are you doing the best you can? Are you, putting it in front of the TV instead of teaching it things, spending time with it, reading to the child, teaching the child? Are you letting the world teach them? Are you doing what you're responsible for? As a parent, you're responsible to raise that child, not the school, not the church, not grandma and grandpa. It's your job as parent to raise that child right, according to God, not according to the world. Because you want them to turn out to be the best they can be. That should be your motivation. So part of that is doing your best in front of them, not coming home and complaining about work all the time, but talking about how you did the best you could with the task that was given to you. I did the best I could where I was at, and teaching them to do that. Taking out the garbage is not fun, but it's responsibility. It's something that has to be done. So you do it the best you can. Feeding the livestock, whatever you're doing, the job has to be done. So teach them to do it the very best they can and to be responsible. The consequences to actions, make sure they understand that, because there are in life. You don't need to be the best friend. You need to be the parent. And you need to teach them to do what's right. It's your job. So what about Joseph? Well, I'm going to wrap this up real quick on Joseph. But he spent years in prison. And one day, just one day, things are going on just like every day. Joseph's taking care of prison, whatever's going on. Well, he gets two new prisoners. And they are the cupbearer and the baker for Pharaoh. Pharaoh's cupbearer and Pharaoh's baker are thrown in prison because they did something that Pharaoh didn't like. I don't know what it was, but Pharaoh didn't like it. So now this goes back to what we talked about earlier. The prison where Joseph is the prison where the king's prisoners are held. So these two are servants to Pharaoh. They're thrown into this prison, and Joseph is in charge of taking care of them. So Joseph goes in and sees them one day, and they're both looking really down. Well, they had a dream that night, and they couldn't figure out what it was. So Joseph says, well, tell me your dream, and God will interpret it. So they do. And Joseph interprets both dreams and tells them one of them is going to be restored back to their position in 3 days, back to serving Pharaoh. The other one's going to be killed in 3 days. And he tells the one that is going to be restored, remember me. Talk to Pharaoh about me. Get me out of here. Don't forget where you heard this. Well, they get released just like Joseph told them. One gets killed, one gets restored. Well, the one that got restored forgets about Joseph. And the Bible says 2 years later, Pharaoh has a dream. It really upsets him. And he calls, and he can't get anybody in Egypt to interpret this dream. Well, all of a sudden, the guy that I think it was cupbearer got restored. Says, "Oh, by the way, when you threw me in prison, a couple of years ago, I met this guy named Joseph, and he interpreted my dream. You might talk to him." So this is where we're going to pick up at. Chapter 41, verse 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph and brought him hastily out of the dungeons and shaved him and changed his garment, and he came unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I've had a dream, and there's none that can interpret it. I have heard it say that you can understand dreams and interpret them. Joseph answered Pharaoh and said, it's not me. God will give you, Pharaoh, the answer. So Joseph interprets this dream for Pharaoh and tells him it's about a famine that's coming. And he tells Pharaoh what you need to do between now and when the famine gets here. Now, this goes back to logistics. It goes back to accounting. This goes back to preparation that Joseph learned in Potiphar's house, and he learned in prison on how to take care of the supplies, get everything that was needed for the house. Now he's telling Pharaoh to take care of this nation. This is what you need to do. And Pharaoh's so impressed that he takes Joseph that day and makes him second in command of the entire nation of Egypt. Pharaoh is his boss. He is right under Pharaoh. Everybody else listens to Joseph. Pharaoh's the only one that doesn't. So from top slave in Potiphar's house, top prisoner in prison, now he's top man in all of Egypt. And he's put in charge of taking care of stuff before this famine comes. You got 7 years before the famine comes to do this. Joseph does the very best he can as number 2 in the nation. Now, he gets the perks of all being number 2 under Pharaoh. That came with time, but his purpose is what he focused on. And he got things ready for the famine. So for 7 years, he acquires grain and things because in 7 years, this has 7 years of drought. Well, the 7 years of drought comes up, and back in Hebron, where Joseph came from, Jacob and Joseph's brothers are running out of food. But they hear that in Egypt, they've got food. Well, Jacob sends the boys to get food in Egypt, sends them with money. And anyway, you got to read that story. It's really interesting. But Joseph recognizes his brothers. They don't recognize him because he looks like an Egyptian. He didn't look like a Hebrew, like their brother did. But in the end, they bow down to him, just as the dream that Joseph had when he was 17 happened. But all this time, Joseph is doing what he was supposed to do. He's done what's right. Even though his brothers hated him and sold him into slavery, he made a choice to not hold a grudge against them, to not hate them for what they did. And there's a verse down here, Genesis 45, that wraps up where Joseph is at. Now, Joseph has identified himself to his brothers. I am Joseph. So now Joseph said to his brothers, come near, I pray to you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. Now, therefore, do not be grieved nor angry with yourself that you sold me hither. For God sent me before you to preserve life. So now Joseph realizes why I had to go through slavery, why I had to go to Potiphar's house, had to go to prison, all because I had to meet the cupbearer, Pharaoh's cupbearer, so he could tell Pharaoh about me, so I could get promoted, so I could take over and prepare, because in this 7-year drought, my dad and mom are going to be close to starving. They're going to come to Egypt, and I'm going to feed them with Egyptian grain. So, in the big picture, now Joseph sees why he's here. It took years. There was 14 years just from the time he got promoted to Pharaoh's number 2. There was 7 years of good times, and in the middle of this 7 years of drought is when his brothers showed up. And this could have been 25, 28 years, 30 years maybe from when he was 17 until now. I don't know. I didn't try to do the math on it, but it's been a long time that he went through things to get to where God wanted him to be, needed him to be, to sustain Israel, which is God's chosen nation. So, if all this hadn't happened, Joseph wouldn't have been there, and his family would have starved, most likely. Now, God could have done something else, but God had this plan to have Joseph in Egypt at this right time during this famine. What's God got for you? What are you? What's your purpose? I don't know. God does, and He's preparing you for that. He's getting you ready for that purpose. Yesterday, Joseph was cleaning the cells and taking care of prison. Dirty conditions. Talked about being in the dungeon. It wasn't the best, but today he's second in command, and his whole life has changed because he was faithful where he was at before. God promoted him. Now, are you there? Are you doing the best you can where you're at? Are you walking with integrity? Are you not giving in to pressure to do wrong, to lie, to steal, to cheat, wherever? Just thought of this. Another instance, when I first got out of college, I went to work for a company, and I worked for them for a whole month. And I found out real quick they were liars and cheaters and thieves. They'd lie to their customers. They would charge them things that shouldn't have charged them for. It was just shady all the way around. And I couldn't deal with it. 1 week before I was to be married to my wife, I quit my job because I couldn't deal with that. I wasn't going to be a liar and a thief and associated with liars and thieves. They didn't have a good name. I found out later they didn't have a good name in the city, but I wasn't going to deal with that. So I said, okay, Lord, this ain't good, but this is not where I need to be. And I trusted God, and He took care of us. We got married, and things went on, and life's been okay. But I stood on what was right, trusting God to take care of the rest. That's what Joseph did. That's what you have to do. Doesn't matter what's going on at work. Doesn't matter what your coworkers are doing. Doesn't matter what your boss is doing. You do what's right. And if the pressure gets so bad that you have to make a decision between lying, cheating, and stealing and doing what's right, or quit, you talk to God about it. But He may be wanting you to quit. He may have something better for you. Every time I've changed jobs, I've got a better job than I had before. Every time. From the time I was 15 working, I went to work earlier than that, but summertime. But I've always got a better job. Anytime I change jobs, I got a better job. And I trusted God in that because I knew He would take care of me. So are you doing that? Are you doing the best you can where you're at? Looking back, it's easy to see what God's doing. In the moment, right now, it's hard to see that. Sometimes it's hard to know what God's doing. Romans 8:28, very famous verse. And we know that God causes everything to work together for good to those who love God and are called according to His purpose. Doesn't say all things are good, but everything, if you're doing what's right and you're called, and you are, if you're a child of God, everything's going to work out for the good. Not all going to be good. Being in prison wasn't good for Joseph, but it worked out for his good and for his family's good in the end. You have a purpose. You're born to do something for God, and He's preparing you for it. Most of the time, you can't see that. The storms that you go through, the trials, the tests, the troubles, that's all preparing you for something in the future. How you go through those things makes a difference. Your attitude, the sooner you learn to trust God and to walk through with integrity and honesty and doing what's right, the sooner you will get to where you need to be. Training can be hard, but there's a purpose for it. And that purpose is to get you where God needs you in His plan. He has a plan, and you are part of it. He's trying to get you there. If you understand that and you listen to Him and you do your best where you're at right now, you'll get to that place, and you'll be blessed in it if you will listen to Him. I was going to go through Esther, but I'm not going to. But read the story of Esther. It's not a very long book in the Bible, but it's very interesting. It's got suspense, it's got drama, it's got villains, it's got heroes, and it shows again how God has a purpose, and God put Esther in a place where she didn't want to be, but she did the best she could where she was. And in Esther's case, she was blessed. She became queen, and she had all the privileges of queen. But she wound up having to take a chance on losing all that to do what God wanted her to do, her purpose. And the best line in there is, "For such a time as this." So read Esther, and when you get to that line, "For such a time as this," you'll understand all this that she went through. And just like Joseph, that's where Joseph was when he told his brothers, "God sent me ahead of you for this time to preserve life. That's why I'm here." All these years of suffering and pain and discouragement, could have been. But Joseph said, "Okay, God, I'm a slave. I'm going to be the slave I can. I'm in prison. I'll be the best prisoner I can be. Now all of a sudden I'm second in command. I'm the best second in command to Pharaoh I can be, because you have a reason for it." And that reason, later he found out, was to take care of his family, even his brothers that hated him. So he showed a godly lifestyle and godly character in the end that he showed from the beginning. Are we doing that? Are you doing that? Get anything out of the video? Share it, like it, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't. If you want to, that's fine. It's up to you. If you see any other videos, maybe they'll encourage you as you walk through this thing we call life. God didn't promise it's going to all be good and easy and merry, and there won't be no troubles. But He does promise He'll always be there with you. And He has a reason to take you through things. It's the end plan He has, and He's trying to get you there. All you got to do is trust Him. And as you trust Him, you'll see it's for a reason. So until next time, Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. And God bless you.